The morning light from 3 different suns streamed through the crystal windows of the Galactic Confederation Academy. Students from across known space filled the hallways, their voices creating a strange mix of sounds that would confuse any earthly ear. Some spoke in musical tones, others in clicks and whistles, and a few communicated through color changes on their skin. Marcus Chen walked quietly through the crowd, his simple brown hair and regular human features making him stand out among his classmates. He carried his books in an old Earth-made backpack while other students used floating storage devices or built-in body pouches. As he moved, conversations stopped around him. Aliens stepped aside, giving him extra space in the hallway. "There goes the Death Worlder," whispered a tall, blue-skinned Etherian to her friend. Her voice carried the musical quality of her species, but the words were not kind. "I heard his planet has poisonous air and deadly storms every day," replied her companion, a being made of living crystal whose body sparkled in the morning light. Marcus pretended not to hear them. He had grown used to these comments over the past year at the academy. Earth was famous throughout the galaxy, but not for good reasons. Most aliens called it a death world because of its dangerous weather, wild animals, and deadly diseases. They could not understand how any intelligent life could develop on such a hostile planet. The advanced xenobiology classroom was located on the 15th floor of the main building. Marcus took his usual seat in the back corner away from the other students. The room itself was a marvel of alien technology. The walls could display any environment in the galaxy, and the air system could create any atmosphere that students needed to breathe. Dr. Valix entered the room with the grace that all Etherians possessed. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow in the classroom light. His large, dark eyes showed intelligence, but when they looked at Marcus, they also showed something else. Disappointment, maybe even disgust. "Good morning, class," Dr. Valix said in his musical voice. "Today we will continue our study of peaceful conflict resolution among civilized species." The word civilized hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus knew it was meant for him. In the past year, Dr. Valix had made it clear that he believed humans were barely above savage animals. The professor often talked about how advanced species solved problems with wisdom and technology, not violence. Around the classroom, Marcus's fellow students prepared for the lesson. The Vorthax students, beings made of living crystal, adjusted their internal light to help them focus. The Nephilim, who were made of gas held together by energy fields, swirled gently in their special containment suits. The Klaxons, insect-like creatures with multiple arms, arranged their note-taking tools with perfect efficiency. Then there was Zara, a Saurian from the same species as some of the galaxy's most feared warriors. But Zara was different from her people's reputation. She was studying to become a peace negotiator. Her green scales caught the light as she turned to look at Marcus. Unlike the others, she did not fear him. She simply found humans interesting. "The key to understanding peaceful resolution," Dr. Valix continued, "is to recognize that violence is the tool of primitive minds. Advanced civilizations have moved beyond such crude methods." A Klaxon student raised one of her forearms. "Professor, what about species that evolved in dangerous environments? Do they not deserve consideration in our galactic community?" Dr. Valix's expression grew cold. "Species that develop through constant violence and struggle often carry those traits with them into space. They may learn to use technology, but they cannot truly understand peace. They see every problem as something to fight rather than something to solve with wisdom." Marcus felt the eyes of several students turn toward him. His face grew warm, but he kept his expression neutral. This was not the first time the professor had made such comments. It would not be the last. "But surely," the Klaxon continued, "survival skills could be useful in some situations." "Survival skills," Dr. Valix repeated with a slight laugh, "are the opposite of civilization. A truly advanced species creates environments where survival is never in question. They build perfect worlds, perfect societies, perfect peace. They do not need to fight because they are wise enough to prevent conflict before it begins." The professor walked to his display screen and brought up images of various alien worlds. Each one looked like paradise. Crystal cities floating in perfect skies, ocean worlds with no storms, garden planets where every plant was beautiful and safe. "These are the achievements of civilized species," Dr. Valix said proudly. "Perfect harmony with their environment. Perfect peace with each other. No violence. No struggle. No death." Marcus looked at the images and thought about Earth. His home planet was nothing like these perfect worlds. Earth had earthquakes and hurricanes, floods and droughts, ice ages and volcanic eruptions. It had predators that could kill a human in seconds and diseases that could wipe out entire populations. But it also had something these perfect worlds did not have. It had taught its children to adapt, to overcome, to never give up. Now, Dr. Valix continued, let us discuss the meditation techniques used by the Vorthak to resolve disputes. When two Vorthak disagree, they do not argue or fight. Instead, they share their inner light with each other until they reach perfect understanding. A Vorthak student began to demonstrate, her crystal body glowing brighter as she explained the process. Marcus watched with genuine interest. The technique was beautiful and peaceful. It would work well for the Vorthak, who were naturally calm and thoughtful beings. But Marcus also thought about what would happen if a Vorthak met someone who did not want to share light and understanding. Someone who wanted to take rather than give. Someone who saw the gentle glow of a Vorthak and thought only of how to exploit that kindness. The lesson continued with examples from other species. The Nephilim used gas-mixing ceremonies to blend their thoughts and emotions. The Klaxons created mathematical equations that represented fairness and used them to solve disputes. The Etherians sang harmony songs that helped conflicting parties find common ground. All of the methods were elegant and peaceful. They spoke of species that had grown beyond the need for conflict, but they also spoke of species that had never faced real danger, real evil or real desperation. These techniques, Dr. Valix concluded, represent the pinnacle of civilized behavior. They require intelligence, patience, and emotional maturity. They are the tools that allow advanced species to maintain peace across the galaxy. The professor's eyes found Marcus again. Of course, some beings may find these methods difficult to understand. When one's first instinct is to fight, it can be hard to imagine solving problems through wisdom and patience. Marcus said nothing. He had learned that defending himself only made things worse. The other students would just see it as proof that humans were aggressive and quick to anger. Instead, he continued taking notes, writing down everything he learned about these peaceful species and their methods. As the class ended, students began to pack their belongings. Marcus moved slowly, knowing that the hallways would be less crowded if he waited. As he put his books away, he heard two Etherian students talking near the door. I do not understand why the Confederation allows Deathworlders into the Academy, one said. They bring their violent nature with them wherever they go. I heard that humans still fight wars on their own planet, the other replied. How can they claim to be ready for galactic civilization? Marcus finished packing and stood up. As he walked past the two Etherians, they stopped talking and moved away from him. Their musical voices fell silent, replaced by the uncomfortable quiet that always followed Marcus through the halls of the academy. He left the classroom and began the long walk back to his dormitory, wondering if he would ever truly belong in this peaceful galaxy of advanced civilizations. The next day's class began like any other. Dr. Valix was discussing the peaceful trading methods used by the Outer Rim colonies when the classroom's energy barrier suddenly flickered and died. The professor stopped mid-sentence, his musical voice trailing off as he stared at the doorway. That should not be possible, whispered a Vorthak student, her crystal body dimming with confusion. The Academy's security systems are supposed to be perfect. Before anyone could respond, a massive figure filled the doorway. 8 feet tall and covered in thick, dark green scales, the creature that entered their classroom was every civilized being's nightmare made real. His reptilian head swiveled slowly as yellow eyes scanned the room, and his long tail lashed behind him like a weapon. Marcus recognized the species immediately. Saurian. But this was not like Zara, his peaceful classmate. This Saurian's scales were scarred from many battles, and his claws were stained dark with old blood. Around his neck hung a collar made from the bones of different species. Each bone represented a life he had taken. Nobody moved, the creature hissed, his forked tongue tasting the air. My name is Krell Bloodclaw, and you are all now my prisoners. The effect on the classroom was immediate and total. The Vorthak students' crystal bodies went completely dark as fear overwhelmed their natural glow. The Nephilim began to lose their shape, their gas-formed bodies starting to break apart in panic. The Klaxons froze in place, their multiple arms trembling. Even the Etherians, usually so graceful and controlled, began to shake with terror. Dr. Valix stood behind his desk, his blue skin turning pale as he stared at the killer. His hands moved toward the emergency communication device on his desk, but Krell saw the movement and snarled. "Touch that device and I will paint these walls with your blood," Krell growled. "I have killed 17 beings across 3 star systems. What is 18 more?" The professor's hands dropped to his sides. All the peaceful wisdom he had taught seemed useless now. His meditation techniques and harmony songs meant nothing when faced with pure evil. Krell stepped further into the room, his massive claws clicking on the floor. "I escaped from Titan Prison Station this morning. Their security was not as perfect as they thought. But I need a ship to get off this planet, and I need hostages to make sure nobody tries to stop me." As he spoke, Krell's eyes moved from student to student, studying each one like a predator choosing prey. When he looked at the Vorthak students, he smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Crystal beings break so beautifully when you apply the right pressure." One of the Vorthak students made a sound like breaking glass. The fear was too much for her peaceful mind to handle. She began to crack, literally, as stress fractures appeared in her crystal body. Krell laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Yes, that's the fear I was looking for. You soft, civilized beings have forgotten what real danger feels like. You have lived so long in your perfect worlds that you have become weak." The Klaxon students huddled together, their insect-like bodies clicking as they whispered prayers in their ancient language. The Nephilim were losing more of their form with each passing second, their gas bodies barely held together by their containment suits. "In my culture," Krell continued, walking slowly between the desks, "strength is everything. The weak exist only to serve the strong. And you are all very, very weak." Dr. Valix finally found his voice, though it shook as he spoke. "What do you want from us? We are just students and teachers. We have no value as hostages." Krell's laugh echoed off the walls. "You underestimate your worth, Professor. The Galactic Confederation cares very much about their precious academy. They will give me anything I want to keep their students safe." The killer moved to the center of the room, positioning himself where he could see all the exits. His yellow eyes swept over the cowering students, counting them like items in an inventory. 23 students and 1 teacher, he mused. "More than enough to get me what I need. A fast ship, clear passage to the outer systems, and perhaps some credits for my trouble." Marcus sat in his corner seat watching everything. Unlike his classmates, he was not frozen with fear. His mind was working, analyzing the situation, looking for patterns and weaknesses. This was what humans called tactical thinking, though most other species would not understand the term. Krell's movement patterns were predictable. He favored his right side, probably due to an old injury. His tail moved in rhythm with his emotions, lashing faster when he was angry or excited. Most importantly, he was overconfident. He saw a room full of peaceful students and assumed they were all helpless. "You know what I find most amusing?" Krell said, addressing the terrified class. "Your species spends so much time talking about how civilized and advanced you are. You look down on warriors like my people as if we are primitive savages." He moved closer to the Vorthak students, whose crystal bodies were now so dim they were almost invisible. "But when real danger appears, where is all that civilization? Where are your meditation techniques now? Your harmony songs? Your mathematical equations for fairness?" Dr. Valix tried to step forward, perhaps thinking to protect his students. But Krell turned toward him with such speed that the professor stumbled backward. "Ah, the teacher wants to be a hero," Krell sneered. "How noble. How civilized. Tell me, Professor, what did you teach these students to do when faced with violence? Did you teach them to fight? To defend themselves? Or did you fill their heads with peaceful nonsense that means nothing when the real world comes calling?" The professor's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. All his years of education, all his knowledge of peaceful species and their methods had not prepared him for this moment. Krell nodded as if the silence was the answer he expected. "That is what I thought. You taught them to be sheep. Perfect, peaceful sheep. And now the wolf has come to visit." The killer's attention turned to the other students, studying each species with the calculating gaze of someone who had killed many times before. "Let me guess. The crystal beings will shatter if I hit them hard enough. The gas creatures will dissipate if I damage their suits. The insects will break if I pull off their arms one by one." Each description made the mentioned students recoil in terror. The klaxons' clicking grew louder and more frantic. The Nephilim were barely maintaining their shape. The Vorthak students looked like they might shatter from fear alone. "And the blue ones," Krell continued, looking at Dr. Valix and the Etherian students, You bleed just like most species, if I remember correctly. Very pretty blood, too, almost silver in color. One of the Etherian students began to cry, her musical voice breaking into discordant notes of pure terror. The sound seemed to please Krell, who smiled wider. This is the reality of the universe, he announced to the room. The strong take what they want from the weak. Your confederation can pretend that civilization has changed this truth. But it hasn't. It has only hidden it from you. Krell moved to the front of the classroom, positioning himself next to Dr. Valix's desk. From there, he could see every student and control all the exits. Now we wait for the authorities to respond to my demands. And while we wait, perhaps I will teach you some lessons about the real world. Lessons your peaceful professors never thought to include in their curriculum. The massive Saurian settled into a position where he could watch the entire room, his yellow eyes gleaming with anticipation. The students remained frozen in terror, their civilized minds unable to process the reality of their situation. All except one. In his corner seat, Marcus Chen sat quietly, his human mind already working on a different kind of lesson plan. While his classmates remained frozen in terror, Marcus Chen did something that surprised everyone in the room, including Krell Bloodclaw. He stood up. The movement was slow and deliberate, not the quick, panicked motion of someone trying to escape. Marcus rose from his seat like he was simply getting up to ask a question during a normal class. His breathing was steady, his hands relaxed at his sides. "Hey there," Marcus said in a calm, conversational tone. "Looks like you're having a rough day." The casual greeting hung in the air like something from another world. Every other being in the classroom was radiating fear so intense that it could be felt through the room's atmospheric sensors. Heart rates were spiking, stress hormones were flooding alien bloodstreams, and several students were on the verge of panic-induced collapse. But Marcus's heart rate was actually slowing down. Krell Bloodclaw had killed beings across 3 star systems, but this was something new. In all his experience, prey responded to his presence in predictable ways. They begged, they cried, they tried to run, or they froze in place. They did not stand up and make small talk. "What did you say?" Krell growled, his yellow eyes narrowing as he focused on the human. "I said it looks like you're having a rough day," Marcus repeated, taking a small step forward. "Prison break, stealing a ship, taking hostages. That's a lot to handle in one morning." The other students watched in horror as Marcus moved closer to the killer. Dr. Valix opened his mouth to warn the human to sit back down, but no sound came out. The Vorthax students' crystal bodies flickered with confusion. Even in their terror, they could sense that something was different about the human's emotional state. Krell studied Marcus more carefully. The human was smaller than most species in the room, with no natural weapons like claws or armor. His skin looked soft and easily damaged. By all appearances, he should be the most terrified being in the classroom. Instead, he was the only one who seemed completely calm. "You are either very brave or very stupid, Death Worlder," Krell said, rising to his full 8-foot height. "Which is it?" Marcus tilted his head slightly as if considering the question seriously. "Maybe a little of both, but I'm curious about something. You said you escaped from Titan Prison Station. That's supposed to be impossible." "Nothing is impossible for someone with the will to do whatever it takes," Krell replied, his chest swelling with pride. "I bet," Marcus said, nodding appreciatively. "Must have taken a lot of planning. How long were you working on it?" The question caught Krell off guard. He had expected begging or threats, not what sounded like genuine interest. 3 years, he found himself answering. 3 years of watching, learning, waiting for the right moment. 3 years, Marcus repeated, impressed. That's some serious patience. Most beings would have given up after a few months. While they talked, Marcus continued to move in small, seemingly random steps. He was not walking directly toward Krell, which would have been obviously threatening. Instead, he was shifting position like someone who was simply restless during a conversation. Each movement was small and natural, but together they were changing the geometry of the room. Dr. Valix watched in amazement as Marcus somehow made talking to a mass murderer look like a normal chat between classmates. The human's voice remained friendly and conversational, showing none of the fear that was consuming everyone else. "You?" "No," Marcus continued. I've been studying different species' approach to problem solving. Most of the beings here are taught to use meditation and harmony techniques. But your people, the Saurians, you're more direct, right? Krell's tail lashed with interest. Finally, someone who understands. Yes, we are direct. We see what we want, and we take it. No meditation, no singing, no mathematical equations. Just strength and will. That makes sense, Marcus agreed. Different environments create different solutions. Your homeworld is pretty harsh, isn't it? Lots of predators, limited resources. The harshest in known space, Krell said proudly. Only the strong survive on Saros Prime. The weak become food. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Same principle as Earth, actually. Different predators, same rules. For the first time since entering the classroom, Krell looked genuinely surprised. Earth is not a real death world. That is just propaganda to make humans seem more dangerous than they are. Is it? Marcus asked, his tone still conversational. Tell me, what's the most dangerous predator you've faced on your homeworld? Krell's eyes gleamed as he remembered. The Razorhawks, flying predators with talons that can slice through saurian scales. They hunt in packs and can attack from any direction. Sounds intense, Marcus said. How big are they? 12 feet from wing to wing, with beaks that can punch through armor plating. Marcus whistled softly. Impressive. On Earth we have something called a grizzly bear. 8 feet tall when it stands up, claws like knives, can run 30 miles per hour, and strong enough to flip over a car. But the thing about grizzly bears is they're not even our apex predator. Krell's tail stopped lashing. What do you mean? Humans are, Marcus said simply. We hunted grizzly bears for sport. For thousands of years, the most dangerous predator on Earth wasn't some massive creature with claws and fangs. It was us. The classroom had gone completely silent. Even the quiet clicking of the klaxon students had stopped. Everyone was listening to this impossible conversation between a human and a killer. You are lying, Krell said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Marcus asked. Think about it. What kind of predator evolves without claws, without fangs, without armor, without poison? What kind of predator is so effective that it doesn't need any natural weapons? As he spoke, Marcus had continued his subtle movements around the room. He was now standing between Krell and most of the students, though he had done it so gradually that the killer hadn't noticed. The kind, Marcus continued, that hunts with its brain instead of its body. The kind that doesn't need to be stronger or faster because it can think 3 moves ahead. The kind that turns the entire environment into a weapon. Krell was beginning to understand that something was wrong with this conversation, but he couldn't figure out what. The human was still just standing there, talking calmly. There was no obvious threat, no weapon, no aggressive posture. But somehow the dynamic in the room was changing. You see, Krell, Marcus said, and his use of the killer's name made several students flinch. You made one mistake when you chose this classroom. What mistake? Krell demanded, his claws extending as he finally sensed danger. Marcus smiled for the first time since the conversation began. It was not a peaceful, civilized smile like the other species used. It was something older, something that carried echoes of humanity's long climb to the top of Earth's food chain. You assume that because I don't have claws or scales or poison, I'm not a predator. The words hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time since entering the classroom, Krell Bloodclaw felt something he had not experienced in years. He felt like prey. Krell Bloodclaw lunged forward with the speed that had made his species feared across the galaxy. His massive claws swept through the air where Marcus had been standing just a moment before, but the human was no longer there. Marcus had moved before Krell even started his attack, not with inhuman speed, but with something far more dangerous. Perfect timing. He had read the killer's micro-expressions, the slight shift in weight, the subtle tension in the saurian's muscles that came before any strike. Marcus had learned these skills not in a classroom, but from a childhood spent avoiding Earth's countless dangers. While Krell's claws whistled through empty air, Marcus was already behind a desk using the furniture as a barrier between himself and the killer. But he wasn't hiding. He was positioning. Interesting technique, Marcus said conversationally, as if commenting on a sporting event, but you telegraph your attacks about 2 seconds before you make them. On Earth, that would get you killed by anything from a house cat to a moose. Krell spun around, confused and angry. He had expected the human to be torn apart by now. Instead, the small figure was standing calmly next to a student desk, apparently unharmed. "Hold still so I can kill you!" Krell roared, charging again. This time Marcus didn't just dodge. As Krell came forward, the human grabbed a chair and swung it in a perfect arc. Not at Krell's body, which was too well armored to damage, but at his legs. The chair shattered against the Saurian's shins, causing him to stumble. Marcus was already moving again, this time toward the front of the classroom. As he moved, he spoke to his terrified classmates, without taking his eyes off Krell. "Everyone, stay down and stay quiet," he said in the same calm tone. "This will be over soon." Dr. Valix watched in amazement as Marcus led Krell away from the students. The human was using the classroom like a three-dimensional chessboard, always staying one move ahead of the killer. It was tactical thinking on a level that the peaceful professor had never imagined. Krell recovered from his stumble and charged again, but this time Marcus was ready with a different strategy. As the Saurian approached, Marcus grabbed the professor's chair and hurled it directly at Krell's face. Not to cause damage, but to block his vision for a crucial second. In that second, Marcus dove to the side and rolled behind Dr. Valix's desk. But he didn't stay there. As soon as Krell turned to follow him, Marcus was moving again, this time grabbing a thick textbook and hurling it at the killer's head. Cool. Book bounced harmlessly off Krell's armored skull, but it served its purpose. While Krell was distracted by the projectile, Marcus had already moved to his next position. "You cannot run forever, human," Krell snarled, his yellow eyes blazing with frustration. "I'm not running," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm hunting." The words sent a chill through the classroom that had nothing to do with the temperature. The alien students had never heard that particular tone in a human voice before. It was calm, controlled, and absolutely certain. Marcus continued to move around the room, but his movements were becoming more purposeful. He was no longer just avoiding Krell's attacks. He was directing them. Each time the Saurian charged, Marcus led him to a specific part of the room, always staying just out of reach. Krell began to realize that something was wrong. He was bigger, stronger, and faster than the human, but somehow he couldn't land a single blow. Every attack met empty air. Every charge ended with him off balance and turned around. "What are you doing?" Krell demanded, breathing hard from his repeated attacks. "Teaching," Marcus replied, ducking under another wild swing. "Your species evolved to be ambush predators, right? Quick strikes, overwhelming force finish the fight before it really starts." Marcus vaulted over a desk as Krell's claws scraped across its surface. "The problem is my species evolved to deal with ambush predators. We learned to survive attacks from creatures that were bigger, stronger, and faster than us." As he spoke, Marcus grabbed a long pointer rod from the front of the classroom. In his hands, the simple teaching tool became something else entirely. "We learned that size and strength don't matter if you can't hit your target," Marcus continued, using the rod to deflect another claw swipe. "We learned that the biggest predator in the forest is just another animal if you can tire it out, confuse it, make it angry enough to make mistakes." Krell was making mistakes now. His attacks were becoming wilder, less controlled. The human's calm voice and impossible ability to stay just out of reach was driving him into a rage that clouded his tactical thinking. "We learned," Marcus said, snapping the pointer rod across Krell's wrist as the Saurian overextended on another attack, "that every predator has weaknesses. You just have to be patient enough to find them." The strike across his wrist made Krell roar in pain and anger. He turned to charge Marcus again, but this time the human was ready with a different surprise. Marcus had positioned himself next to the classroom's environmental controls. As Krell charged, Marcus slammed his hand on the gravity adjustment panel. The classroom's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, sending everyone floating for a brief moment before slamming back down. But Marcus had been ready for it, bracing himself against the wall. Krell, in mid-charge, was thrown completely off balance. Before the Saurian could recover, Marcus was moving again, but this time, instead of running away, he moved toward Krell. The killer, still disoriented from the gravity shift, didn't see the attack coming. Marcus used every piece of classroom equipment as a weapon. The pointer rod became a staff to strike pressure points. Desk chairs became shields and projectiles. Even the holographic display projector became a tool, its beam directed into Krell's eyes to temporarily blind him. But the most effective weapon Marcus used was Krell's own anger. Every taunt, every calm comment, every impossible dodge drove the Saurian further into rage. And rage, as any human knew, made predators sloppy. "The thing about Earth," Marcus said, as he led Krell into another futile charge, "is that it doesn't just kill you with big obvious threats. It's the small things that get you. The poison you can't see, the trap you don't notice until it's too late, the predator that doesn't look dangerous until it's over." Marcus had been leading Krell in a specific pattern around the room, and now the Saurian was exactly where the human wanted him, next to the emergency lockdown panel. "Your mistake," Marcus said, his hand hovering over the lockdown controls, "was thinking that because humans don't look like predators, we're not dangerous." Krell realized too late what was happening. Marcus slammed his fist into the emergency panel, and the classroom's security system activated. Energy barriers snapped into place around Krell, trapping him in a containment field designed to hold even the most dangerous beings. But the barriers wouldn't hold a Saurian warrior for long. Marcus knew this, just as he knew that security forces would be responding to the emergency signal. He had maybe 2 minutes before Krell broke free, and maybe 5 minutes before help arrived. That was exactly the timeline he had been working toward from the beginning. "Now," Marcus said, turning to address the still terrified classroom, "let's talk about the real difference between civilized species and Deathworlders." As he spoke, Krell threw himself against the energy barriers, roaring with fury. The barriers flickered under the assault, but they held. For now. "It's not that we're more violent," Marcus continued, his voice still calm despite everything that had just happened. "It's that we understand violence in ways you've never had to learn. We know how to face it, how to use it, and most importantly, how to end it." The human looked around at his classmates, seeing them with new eyes. They were still terrified, but there was something else in their expressions now. Something that looked almost like awe. "Your civilizations are beautiful," Marcus said gently. "Your peaceful methods, your harmony, your cooperation, they're everything the galaxy should aspire to. But sometimes, beauty needs protection. Sometimes, peace needs guardians who understand war." Marcus turned back to watch Krell struggling against the barriers. "That's what Deathworlders are really for. Not to bring violence to your perfect worlds, but to stand between your perfect worlds and the violence that still exists in the universe." The energy barriers flickered again, more urgently this time. Marcus checked the countdown timer on his watch, a simple Earth device that several of his classmates had mocked as primitive. "Security should be here in about 3 minutes, he announced to the room. "Krell will break through those barriers in about 2, which means we have exactly 1 minute of safety for everyone to understand something important." Marcus looked at each of his classmates in turn, his gaze lingering on the Vorthax students, whose crystal bodies were slowly beginning to glow again, and the Klaxons who had stopped their panicked clicking. "You are not weak because you choose peace," he said. "You are strong because you've built a civilization where peace is possible. But the universe is bigger than your civilization, and not everything in it shares your values." The barriers flickered more violently. Krell's roars were getting louder. "That's why you need us," Marcus concluded. "Not because we're better than you, but because we're different from you. Because sometimes the best way to preserve peace is to be very, very good at war." The energy barriers finally gave way just as the first security forces burst through the classroom door. When the security forces arrived, they found a scene that none of them had expected. Krell Bloodclaw, the killer who had terrorized 3 star systems, was unconscious on the classroom floor. His massive form was wrapped in improvised restraints, made from desk cables and chair parts bound so efficiently that even his incredible strength could not break free. Standing calmly beside the fallen Saurian was Marcus Chen, apparently unharmed and already returning to his seat. The human's heart rate, monitored by the Academy's health sensors, had returned to completely normal levels. He was putting his textbooks back in order as if nothing unusual had happened. The rest of the classroom was a different story. Desks were scattered, chairs were broken, and the environmental controls were flickering from the damage they had sustained. The alien students remained huddled in various corners, their eyes wide, as they stared at Marcus with something between fear and amazement. Commander Thrix, head of Academy Security, was a veteran Centaurian officer who had seen combat across the galaxy. But even he was speechless as he looked at the scene. His security team had expected to find hostages in danger and a violent standoff. Instead, they found a captured killer and a human calmly doing homework. "What happened here?" Commander Thrix asked, his forearms gesturing at the chaos around them. Dr. Valix tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. His musical, Etherean voice, usually so confident and flowing, came out in stutters and broken notes. How could he explain what he had witnessed? How could he describe watching a Death Worlder handle a trained killer like it was just another class exercise? "Krell Bloodclaw entered our classroom," Marcus said simply, not looking up from his books. "He threatened the students, so I stopped him. Security should probably check his restraints. I'm not sure how long they'll hold a Saurian." Commander Thrix's team immediately surrounded the unconscious killer, their weapons ready. Medical scanners confirmed that Krell was alive but would remain unconscious for several hours. The improvised restraints, they discovered, were far more sophisticated than they appeared. Someone with detailed knowledge of Saurian anatomy had placed them at exactly the right pressure points to prevent escape without causing permanent harm. "You did this?" Commander Thrix asked Marcus, his tone carrying decades of military disbelief. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied politely. "He's unharmed, just sleeping. I figured you'd want to question him when he wakes up." The security commander looked around the destroyed classroom, then at the unconscious mass murderer, then back at the calm human student. In 30 years of military service, Thrix had never seen anything quite like this. "How?" was all he managed to say. Marcus finally looked up from his textbooks. He was angry and overconfident. Angry opponents make tactical mistakes. Overconfident opponents don't adapt when their initial strategy fails. It just took patience and an understanding of the room's layout. The simple explanation hung in the air like something from another world. The alien students listened to Marcus describe the capture of a notorious killer the same way he might explain a math problem. No drama, no boasting, just calm analysis of cause and effect. Zara, the peaceful Saurian student, was the first to find her voice. "Krell Bloodclaw has killed 17 beings, trained warriors. How could one human student defeat him so easily?" Marcus considered the question seriously. It wasn't easy, but it also wasn't impossible. Every predator has patterns, weaknesses, limitations. You just have to observe carefully and think several moves ahead. "But you have no weapons," protested a Klaxon student, her forearms clicking nervously. "No claws, no armor, no natural defenses. How did you survive his attacks?" "I didn't try to," Marcus answered. "I avoided them instead. On Earth, we learned long ago that you don't fight a grizzly bear by being stronger than a grizzly bear. You fight it by being smarter than a grizzly bear." Dr. Valix finally found his voice, though it was much quieter than usual. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. I have spent this entire year believing that humans were primitive and violent. I was wrong." Marcus looked at his professor with genuine confusion. "You weren't wrong about the violent part, sir. Humans are violent. We're very good at violence. But that doesn't make us primitive." The statement sent ripples through the classroom. Several alien students exchanged glances, trying to process this new information. "I don't understand," Dr. Valix admitted. Marcus set down his pen and looked around at his classmates. For the first time since he had arrived at the academy, he had their complete attention. Not their fear or their disgust, but their genuine interest in what he had to say. "Violence and civilization aren't opposites," Marcus explained. "They're tools. You can use violence to destroy civilization, or you can use violence to protect it. The choice depends on wisdom, not strength." A Vorthak student, her crystal body, now glowing with curiosity rather than fear, asked, "But how do you maintain wisdom when using violence? Does it not corrupt the user?" Sometimes, Marcus admitted honestly. That's why humans develop things like military codes of honor, rules of engagement, and civilian oversight of armed forces. We learned that being good at violence meant we had to be even better at controlling it. Commander Thrix had been listening to this conversation while his team secured Krell. Now he approached Marcus with the respectful attention that one warrior gives to another. I have read reports about human military tactics, the Centaurian said. Your species has a reputation for defeating larger, stronger enemies through superior strategy. I always assumed those reports were exaggerated. They're not, Marcus replied. But the strategy part is more important than the military part. Humans don't win fights by being the strongest. We win by understanding the fight better than our opponents do. One of the Etherean students, her musical voice now filled with wonder rather than fear, asked, Is this why the Confederation recruited humans? Not as curiosities, but as protectors? Marcus nodded. The galaxy is full of peaceful species who have built beautiful civilizations. But the galaxy is also full of beings like Krell who want to destroy those civilizations. Someone has to stand in between. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For over a year, these students had been taught that violence was the tool of primitive minds. Now they were forced to confront the possibility that sometimes violence was the tool that preserved advanced minds. Dr. Valix looked at his destroyed classroom, then at his unharmed students, then at the human who had made it all possible. I need to revise my curriculum, he said quietly. No, sir, Marcus said respectfully. Your curriculum is perfect for your students. They should learn meditation and harmony and peaceful resolution. The galaxy needs beings who think that way. Marcus gestured toward the unconscious Krell. But the galaxy also needs beings who can deal with problems that can't be meditated away. That's not a failure of civilization. That's just division of labor. Commander Thrix was nodding in agreement. In military terms, we call it combined arms tactics. Different units with different capabilities working together toward a common goal. Exactly, Marcus said. Your species provide the wisdom and vision to build something worth protecting. Mine provides the skills to actually protect it. As the security team prepared to remove Krell from the classroom, one of the Klaxon students asked, What happens now? How do we continue learning together after this? Marcus smiled, and for the first time, it was the kind of smile his classmates recognized, warm, friendly, and completely non-threatening. The same way we always have. You teach me about meditation and harmony and peaceful thinking. I teach you about tactical analysis and threat assessment. We all get smarter together. Dr. Valix was already making notes for his revised lesson plans. Perhaps we should add a course on protective strategies to complement our peace studies. I'd be happy to help design it, Marcus offered. As long as we're clear that the goal is still peace. Violence should always be the last option, never the first. As Krell was carried out of the classroom on a security stretcher, the alien students began to clean up the scattered furniture. But the atmosphere in the room had changed completely. Where there had once been whispered comments about death, worlders, and primitive humans, there was now thoughtful discussion about different types of intelligence and different ways to contribute to galactic civilization. Zara approached Marcus as he finished packing his books. I owe you an apology as well, she said. I thought I understood my own species because I chose peace over war. But watching you today, I realize I never really understood what war was for. Marcus looked at the peaceful Saurian with respect. You understand the most important part. You know that peace is worth fighting for. That's the wisdom that warriors like me need to remember. As the students filed out of the destroyed classroom, their conversations were different than they had ever been before. Instead of speaking in separate groups divided by species, they were mixing together, sharing perspectives on protection and preservation, on strength and wisdom, on the different ways that civilized beings could contribute to the common good. Dr. Valix was the last to leave, pausing at the doorway to look back at Marcus. I have one more question if you don't mind. Of course, sir. When you stood up to face Krell, were you afraid? Marcus considered the question carefully.